Get on the ground, now. 3 police officers surround an elderly black woman beside an old Buick with its hood up, their hands hovering near their holsters. The woman's weathered hands slowly rise, her dignified face a mask of controlled emotion. Officers, this is my vehicle. I'm just trying to— I said on the ground, Officer Souza barks, stepping forward aggressively. For a split second, something flashes in the elderly woman's eyes, not fear, but calculation. Her body tenses in a way that seems impossible for her 75-year-old frame. Cops harass elderly black woman, unaware she's America's most decorated Navy SEAL. Welcome back to Timeless Memoir, where we uncover the stories that society tries to forget. Today's story will challenge everything you think you know about judgment, heroism, and the invisible battles fought by those we too easily dismiss. In a quiet neighborhood on an ordinary Tuesday, Edna Sharp found herself staring down the barrels of systemic racism. But what these officers couldn't possibly know was that they were confronting a woman who had stared down far worse and survived. A woman whose classified military record would make their knees buckle if they knew. As Officer Hines reaches for his handcuffs, Edna's fingers twitch almost imperceptibly. Decades of the most elite military training in American history scream through her muscle memory, urging her to neutralize the threat. But she hesitates, a decision that will set in motion events nobody in this neighborhood could anticipate. Before we continue this extraordinary story, take a second to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Trust me, you'll want to know when we release stories like this that expose the truth behind America's complicated relationship with race, respect, and recognition. Have you ever witnessed someone being misjudged based on their appearance? What happened? Share your experience in the comments below. Now, let's rewind 12 hours to understand how Edna Sharp, former Navy SEAL with more decorations than most generals, found herself facing down officers who saw nothing but an elderly black woman they assumed was breaking into a car. 5:30 a.m. Edna Sharp moves through her modest home with the silent efficiency that defined her military career. Her morning routine hasn't changed in 30 years. Stretching exercises that would impress women half her age, a breakfast of steel-cut oats and black coffee, and a meticulous inspection of her small but immaculate living space. The walls hold few photographs. Most remain in a locked chest beneath her bed. Images of younger days, classified missions, and teammates whose names the public will never know. Only one photo sits prominently on her mantel. Edna in dress whites receiving a medal, the details deliberately blurred by the photographer for security reasons. "Morning, Miss Sharp," calls Alicia Smith from across the street, jogging with her rescue dog. "Beautiful day coming." Edna raises a hand in acknowledgement, her smile genuine but measured. She likes Alicia, an investigative journalist with the local paper who respects boundaries and never pries about why an elderly woman living alone moves with such unusual poise. "Garden's looking spectacular," Alicia adds, slowing briefly. "Those roses are prize-worthy." "Just patience and discipline," Edna replies, her voice carrying the faint remnant of command presence. Nothing grows without both. What Alicia doesn't know is that gardening became Edna's therapy after Vietnam. After operations so classified that even now, decades later, the files remain redacted. Digging in soil helped her hands forget the feeling of other, darker tasks. At the corner market, Mr. Chen greets Edna warmly while Mrs. Abernathy from the Neighborhood Association pointedly ignores her. The same woman who complained about those people bringing down property values at the last community meeting. Edna notices but doesn't react. She's navigated far more dangerous waters than suburban microaggressions. Back home, she checks her calendar. Werner James will call today, their monthly check-in. Of her old team, only Werner and Admiral Robertson remain. Their conversations are coded by habit, discussing fishing trips that were actually classified operations in territories where Americans officially never set foot. The mail arrives with another letter from the Veterans Affairs Office, the 5th this year. They're still processing her request for treatment for her shoulder injury. The irony isn't lost on her. The same government that once trusted her with national secrets now questions whether her pain is service. As afternoon approaches, Edna notices her Buick's dashboard warning light. The battery's been temperamental lately. She makes a mental note to check it before her doctor's appointment tomorrow. Her phone rings. "Werner, right on schedule." "Sharp," she answers, military habit never fading. "The Eagle still flies at midnight," Werner jokes, their old recognition code now an inside joke between aging warriors. "How's Arizona treating you?" she asks, settling into her armchair. "Hot, boring, safe." He pauses. "They're declassifying the Mekong operation next month." Edda's breath catches. After all this time, Robertson pulled strings. Says it's time people knew, especially about your role. She stares at her reflection in the window. A dignified black woman with silver hair and eyes that have seen too much. "I never did what I did for recognition, Werner." "That's exactly why you deserve it," he replies. "The world should know what you accomplished when most women couldn't even open a bank account without their husband's permission." After they hang up, Edna sits motionless, contemplating a past she's kept buried for decades. Recognition now seems pointless. Too little, too late. What difference would it make if people knew she had once been among the most lethal operatives in American military history? Outside, the battery light on her Buick blinks ominously as storm clouds gather on the horizon. Tomorrow's problems, she decides, heading inside as the neighborhood children return from school. None of them imagining that the quiet elderly woman they waved to once changed the course of military history. The next morning, Edna's Buick refuses to start. Dark clouds threaten rain as she pops the hood, assessing the corroded battery terminals with expert precision. Her doctor's appointment is in 40 minutes. An evaluation for that shoulder injury the VA keeps questioning. She retrieves jumper cables from her trunk. Movements economical, despite the twinge in her shoulder. A souvenir from extracting a captured intelligence officer from North Vietnam in '68. As she connects the cables to her neighbor's parked car, with standing permission, a white sedan cruises slowly down the street. Inside that sedan, Officers Hines, Gray, and Souza respond to a call about suspicious activity. Dispatch said elderly black subject tampering with vehicles on Maple Street. Officer Gray notes, scanning the quiet neighborhood. Officer Souza spots Edna. "There, looks like we've got our perp." Officer Hines frowns. "Let's just assess the situation first." They park and approach with hands near their weapons, standard procedure for a potential car theft. Edna notices them immediately, her situational awareness never dulled by age. She recognizes their formation, their posture, the subtle tells of adrenaline preparing for confrontation. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," Officer Gray calls out. Edna straightens slowly. "Officers, good morning. This is my car. I'm just jump-starting the battery." Officer Souza moves to flank her, a tactical approach for a potentially hostile subject. "We received reports of someone tampering with vehicles in this area. I lived here for 27 years, Edna explains calmly, showing her keys. "You can check my ID. Hands where we can see them," Souza barks as Edna reaches toward her pocket. Officer Hines notices something the others miss. The way Edna's eyes track all three of them simultaneously, how her stance subtly shifts to maintain balance. Not typical for a frightened elderly woman. "Let's all stay calm," Hines suggests. "Ma'am, we need to verify." "She's reaching!" Souza suddenly shouts as Edna moves to disconnect the jumper cables. What happens next occurs in 6 seconds. Souza lunges forward, grabbing Edna's injured shoulder with unnecessary force. Pain shoots through her old wound, triggering decades of combat training. Her body reacts before her mind can intervene. In one fluid motion, Edna redirects Souza's momentum, using his own weight against him. Her elbow finds the nerve cluster beneath his arm with surgical precision. Souza's hand goes numb, his balance compromised. For a heartbeat, Edna could incapacitate him completely. The muscle memory is there, the pathways carved by thousands of training hours. But civilian awareness reasserts control. She pulls back, allowing Souza to stumble rather than fall. "She assaulted an officer," Souza shouts, humiliation fueling his anger. Officer Gray draws her weapon. On the ground. Now, Edna complies, though every instinct screams against placing herself in a vulnerable position. As her cheek touches the cold concrete, neighbors emerge from their homes. Alicia Smith appears with her phone recording. "What are you doing?" "That's Miss Sharp. She lives here," Alicia calls out. "Stay back, ma'am. Police business," Officer Gray responds. Officer Hines handcuffs Edna with uncharacteristic gentleness, noticing the surgical precision of a scar on her wrist. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer." "I reacted to pain," Edna states calmly. Officer Souza grabbed my injured shoulder. "Yeah, right," Souza scoffs, flexing his hand as feeling returns. "Where'd you learn that move?" "Tai Chi for seniors." A small crowd gathers as the officers help Edna to her feet. Mrs. Abernathy watches with barely concealed satisfaction. Mr. Chen shakes his head in disgust. Children stare wide-eyed as the respected elderly neighbor is placed in a police car. "This is going in the paper," Alicia calls out, still recording. "I want all your badge numbers." In the back of the police car, Edna sits with perfect posture, her face betraying nothing. She catalogs details automatically. Officer Hines' hesitation, Gray's by-the-book approach, Souza's wounded pride. She's analyzing potential scenarios, escape routes, pressure points, then catches herself. This isn't a hostage situation in hostile territory. This is America 2025. She's a 75-year-old black woman being arrested outside her own home. As the car pulls away, Edna makes a decision. After decades of shadows and silence, perhaps it's finally time for the truth to emerge. Not for her sake. She's never sought recognition, but because some battles can't be fought from the shadows. The rain begins to fall as the police car disappears around the corner, leaving Edna's Buick with its hood still open, jumper cables dangling like broken promises. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzz overhead as Edna sits perfectly still on the metal bench. Unlike the nervous energy radiating from other detainees, she remains centered, a technique mastered during 72 hours of captivity in Laos, 1969. "Sharp, Edna J.," calls the booking officer. "Approach the desk." She rises with dignity that seems out of place in the dingy processing room. Officer Gray stands nearby, watching with growing uncertainty. Something about this elderly woman doesn't fit the profile of their typical arrests. "Empty your pockets," the booking officer instructs mechanically. Edna places her items precisely on the counter. House keys, a handkerchief, exact change for bus fare, and a small metal object that catches Officer Gray's attention. "What's that?" Gray asks, pointing to the tarnished item. "Challenge coin," Edna replies simply. The booking officer picks it up, examining the faded insignia. "Never seen this unit designation before?" "You wouldn't have," Edna says, her voice matter-of-fact. The officer shrugs and continues processing. "Date of birth? March 17, 1950. Occupation?" A pause. "Retired. Previous occupation?" Another pause, longer this time. "Government service." Officer Hines, observing from nearby, notices her deliberate vagueness. Most people eagerly share their former careers, especially government positions. Her reticence triggers his investigative instinct. "Right index finger on the scanner," the booking officer instructs. Edna complies. The machine hums, processing her fingerprint. Suddenly, an alert flashes on the screen. The booking officer frowns, taps several keys, then looks up with confusion. Systems flagging a security protocol. He lowers his voice, speaking to his supervisor. "Says we need to contact federal verification." The supervisor approaches, studies the screen, then glances at Edna with newfound wariness. "Ma'am, are you currently employed by any federal agency?" "No," Edna answers truthfully. "Were you previously employed by any intelligence organization?" Edna's expression remains neutral. "I served my country." "That's all I'm at liberty to discuss." Officer Souza, nursing his pride in a coffee at a nearby desk, scoffs loudly. "Yeah, right. She's probably got a library fine triggering the system." The supervisor makes a call, speaking in hushed tones while periodically glancing at Edna. After hanging up, he approaches Officer Hines. "Keep her separate from General Holding. Something's not adding up." Hines nods, curiosity piqued. "What about her phone call?" "Process that now," the supervisor instructs. At the phone, Edna dials a number from memory. Not her lawyer, not family, but a secure line that hasn't changed in 30 years. "Identification," answers a gruff voice. "Mako 6 Echo, November," Edna responds, using a code name inactive since the Cold War ended. Silence, then verification. "Sunrise over Mekong, 1968. More silence. Then, location? Precinct 18, downtown. Misdemeanor charge. Old for Werner." Moments later, Werner James's voice comes through, alert despite the hour. "Edna, what happened?" Situation developing, nothing critical. Her voice remains measured, revealing nothing to those listening. "Might need Robertson's assistance." Understood. 6 hours. The call ends. Edna returns to the bench, her expression unchanged. Meanwhile, Officer Hines begins searching Edna's name in the department database. Her driver's license and property records appear normal, but a secondary search reveals an unusual flag on her social security number, a government designation he's never encountered. Curious, he expands his search to military databases he can access as a former Army reservist. Most records return access denied, but one partial file mentions Operation Kingfisher, with Edna's name among a heavily redacted personnel list. Across the room, Officer Gray processes Edna's personal effects, pausing at the challenge coin again. The insignia bothers her. Something about dolphins and an eagle that doesn't match any military unit she's familiar with. On impulse, she photographs it with her phone. Officer Souza approaches Hines's desk. "Found anything on our senior citizen ninja?" "Nothing concrete," Hines replies carefully, unwilling to share his growing suspicions. "But her fingerprint triggered a federal security protocol." "Probably a glitch," Silva dismisses. "She's just some old lady who got lucky with that move she pulled. I wasn't expecting resistance from someone her age." Hines studies Edna across the room. Her perfect posture, alert eyes continuously scanning exits and personnel, hands relaxed but ready. "Maybe that's exactly what she wanted you to think." In the holding area, Edna closes her eyes, appearing to doze but actually calculating. 6 hours until Werner's contact arrives. The fingerprint alert means her file has been flagged. Soon, questions will arise about her service record, parts of which remain classified even 50 years later. For decades, she's lived quietly, her extraordinary past hidden behind the invisibility society grants elderly black women. That invisibility has been both shield and prison. Now, as the system processes her presence, that shield is cracking. And somewhere in the Pentagon, a secure phone is ringing on Admiral William Robertson's desk, a call that will set in motion the unraveling of one of the military's most closely guarded secrets. While Edna waits in holding, 3 separate investigations begin to converge on a truth hidden for half a century. In the precinct's back office, Officer Hector Hines hunches over his computer, digging deeper than protocol requires. The security flag on Edna's fingerprint nags at him. Something doesn't add up about this assault case. "You still working that old lady file?" his sergeant asks, passing by with coffee. Something's off, Hines replies, not looking up. Her fingerprint scan triggered a federal security protocol I've never seen before. Probably worked as a janitor at the Pentagon, the sergeant chuckles. You know how the government overclassifies everything. But Hines isn't laughing. On his screen, a partially declassified military document mentions Operation Kingfisher, with most names redacted, except for a reference to E. Sharp as essential personnel. The operation date, 1968. Vietnam. She'd have been barely 18, he murmurs, calculating the years. His search expands to newspaper archives. Nothing under Edna's name, but a 1969 article mentions unprecedented heroism by unnamed special operators during a mission to extract POWs from North Vietnam. The article notes that details remain classified, with only a Pentagon spokesperson confirming that American personnel of exceptional skill were involved. Across town, Alicia Smith's apartment has transformed into an impromptu newsroom. Her cell phone footage of Edna's arrest has already garnered 50,000 views on social media. The comments section blazes with outrage over police treatment of an elderly black woman. This is bigger than just another harassment case, Alicia tells her editor over the phone. I've lived across from Miss Sharp for 3 years. There's something about her that's always seemed different. Different how? Her editor asks skeptically. The way she moves, her awareness, and she never talks about her past, ever. Alicia scrolls through property records on her laptop. She bought her house in 1998 with cash. Before that, there's almost no record of her existence. Maybe she's in witness protection, her editor suggests. Or something else entirely. Alicia opens a new document. I'm going to find out. Meanwhile, in Arizona, Werner James paces his living room, phone pressed to his ear. At 77, his body shows the wear of decades of special operations, but his mind remains razor sharp. They've got her in holding on some bogus assault charge, he tells the man on the other end. Her prints triggered the security protocol. Was bound to happen eventually, replies Admiral William Robertson, his voice carrying the weight of command despite retirement. Question is, what do we do about it? We could let it play out, Werner suggests. Local charges, local resolution, keep the past buried. And if they dig deeper? Pentagon's been looking for an excuse to declassify Kingfisher anyway. Werner stops pacing. Bill, if they declassify Kingfisher, everything comes out. Not just about Edna, but about what really happened in '68. The experimental program, the women we recruited, the missions nobody was supposed to know about. Maybe it's time, Robertson says quietly. She deserves the recognition. They all do. Most didn't live to see it, Werner reminds him grimly. Exactly why those who did should be acknowledged. Robertson's tone shifts to decision. I'm calling in some favors. Get to that precinct. I'll handle the Pentagon side. Back at the station, Officer Rosemary Gray sits in the break room, staring at her phone. She's searched military insignias for 30 minutes, trying to identify the symbol on Edna's challenge coin. Any luck? Asks a colleague. Nothing matches, she admits. Closest is Naval Special Warfare, but this has modifications I can't find in any database. Her phone pings with a text from her father, a military history professor. Where did you see this? This looks like a prototype insignia from a classified program. Need to talk ASAP. Gray glances toward Holding, where Edna sits with the same calm vigilance she's maintained for hours. For the first time, Gray wonders if they've made a terrible mistake. Officer Souser, meanwhile, completes his incident report, embellishing Edna's assault to justify his actions. As he types, his shoulder still aches where Edna's precise strike temporarily paralyzed his arm, a technique he recognizes from advanced combat training. No wonder she learned that at the senior center, he mutters. His search history reveals queries for elderly martial arts experts and self-defense for seniors, unwilling to consider more extraordinary explanations. As evening approaches, these parallel investigations accelerate toward collision. Hines discovers a photograph from 1970, a military ceremony with faces obscured for national security. Only a partial caption remains. Exceptional service by specialized personnel, including ES First of Her. Alicia uncovers Edna's nursing school registration from 1972, noting the 4-year gap in her history between high school graduation and nursing school, years that perfectly align with Operation Kingfisher. And at the Pentagon, Admiral Robertson stands before a secure terminal, entering clearance codes unused for decades. On his screen appears a file marked "Ultraviolet Clearance Required," and beneath it a mission designation: Kingfisher, Experimental Integration of Female Operatives in Special Warfare Units, 1967 to 1971. His finger hovers over the declassification authorization. After 50 years of silence, he makes his decision. As night falls, Werner James boards a military transport flight arranged through channels that don't officially exist. In his briefcase, documentation that will either protect Edna's privacy forever or expose her as one of the most extraordinary soldiers in American history. The clock is ticking. By morning, 3 separate paths will converge on a truth that will force America to reconsider everything it thinks it knows about heroism, recognition, and the invisible battles fought by those history has overlooked. Zenguam noticed a stir in Obler's overlooked. Dawn breaks over the precinct as Officer Hines returns from a sleepless night of research. The pieces don't fit any narrative he expected when arresting an elderly woman for assaulting an officer. His folder now contains fragments of a classified history, breadcrumbs leading to something extraordinary. He finds Officer Gray in the break room, her expression troubled. "You look how I feel," he observes. Gray shows him her phone, a text from her father with an attached document. Dad pulled strings with his military contacts. This is all he could get, but... The document is heavily redacted but clear enough, a 1967 Pentagon memo authorizing experimental integration of female operatives in special warfare units, with a handwritten note, "Find candidates with exceptional aptitude who won't be missed." "Won't be missed?" Hines repeats. "Dad says it meant women with minimal family connections," Gray explains, "and likely minorities, since their disappearance would attract less attention during that era." The implication hangs between them, the systematic devaluation of certain lives, repurposed as a recruitment strategy. Before they can discuss further, the precinct doors open. A tall, weathered man in his 70s enters, moving with the unmistakable bearing of military command. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. "I'm looking for your commanding officer," the man announces, "regarding Edna Sharp." Across town, Alicia Smith receives an encrypted email from an anonymous source. The message contains only a video file and the words, "America should know. Broadcast this." The video begins playing grainy footage from 1968, declassified hours ago. A military briefing room, a mission into North Vietnam to extract 3 captured intelligence officers from a heavily guarded compound. The camera pans to the Special Operations team. 5 operators, their faces blurred except one. Elusa gasps, recognizing a much younger Edna Sharp, her expression fierce with determination as she studies terrain maps. An officer's voice. "Mako team, you have 1 shot at this. Intelligence confirms the prisoners will be moved tomorrow. After that, they're beyond our reach." The young Edna speaks. "Sir, I've identified an approach through the river drainage system. It's unguarded because they believe it's impassable." "It is impassable," another operator objects. "Not for me," Edna replies with quiet confidence. The footage cuts to aftermath debriefing, a superior officer addressing the team. "What you accomplished tonight will never be acknowledged publicly. Your country owes you a debt it can never repay, and will never admit to." The camera lingers on Edna's face as she receives a medal that doesn't officially exist. Alyssa's hands tremble as she begins typing the story that will change everything. Back at the precinct, the conference room has become a battlefield of competing authorities. Captain Reynolds faces off against Warner James and the JAG officers. "You're telling me this woman in my holding cell is some kind of, what, secret super soldier?" Reynolds scoffs. Werner James slides a folder across the table. Edna Sharp was part of a classified program integrating women into special operations during Vietnam. Her team conducted missions so sensitive they remained classified for 50 years. This morning, Admiral Robertson authorized partial declassification. Reynolds skims the documents, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's real," Werner confirms. While America was debating whether women belonged in combat roles, Edna was conducting operations that rewrote the rules of warfare. She has more confirmed high-value extractions than any operator in history. Officer Souza enters, stopping short at the tension in the room. "Sir?" The prisoner is requesting water. "She's not a prisoner," one JAG officer corrects sharply. "As of 20 minutes ago, all charges have been dropped by federal order." Souza blinks in confusion. "For assaulting an officer? On what grounds?" Werner James fixes him with a stare that makes Souza step back involuntarily. "On the grounds that Edna Sharp has forgotten more about combat than you'll ever know, son. And if she'd actually wanted to assault you, we wouldn't be having this conversation." In the holding area, Edna sits in meditation, her mind replaying the mission that earned her the Navy Cross, a decoration officially listed as awarded to John Doe to maintain her cover. The extraction of 3 intelligence officers had been just the beginning. What followed was a firefight that should have ended with her team's annihilation. Instead, Edna had led them through a labyrinth of underground tunnels, engaging enemy forces with a precision that became legendary among the few cleared to know. 27 hostiles neutralized, 0 civilian casualties, all American personnel extracted alive. Her thoughts are interrupted as the door opens. Officer Hines enters with Werner James. "Werner," she acknowledges with the faintest smile. "Took you long enough?" "Traffic was hell," he replies, their casual banter masking 5 decades of shared combat experience. Hines watches this exchange, struggling to reconcile the elderly woman before him with the operative described in the classified files. "Miss Sharp, all charges have been dropped. You're free to go." "Are they declassifying everything?" she asks Werner directly. "Not everything, just enough." Werner helps her stand. Robertson made the call, says it's time people knew. For the first time, Edna's composure wavers. "I never wanted recognition." "This isn't about recognition," Werner counters. "It's about truth, about correcting the record." As they walk through the precinct, officers stop and stare. Word has spread. Fragments of an impossible story about the elderly black woman they'd dismissed hours earlier. Outside, reporters have gathered, Alicia Smith at the forefront. Camera flashes explode as Edna emerges, her posture automatically adjusting to minimize her profile, a sniper's habit never unlearned. "Miss Sharp, is it true you were part of a secret Navy SEAL program during Vietnam?" a reporter shouts. "Miss Sharp, how many missions did you complete?" "Miss Sharp, why has your service been classified until now?" Edna freezes, the assault of questions and cameras triggering combat responses she hasn't needed in decades. Her breathing shifts, her vision narrows. Werner recognizes the signs immediately and steps between her and the press. "Ms. Sharp will not be making statements at this time," he announces firmly. But Edna places a hand on his arm, stopping him. After 50 years of silence, perhaps it's time for her voice to be heard. She steps forward, and the crowd falls silent before her quiet authority. "I served my country when my country barely acknowledged my humanity," she begins, her voice steady. "I did so not for recognition, but because it needed to be done. That's all I have to say today." As Werner guides her through the crowd toward a waiting car, Officer Hines watches from the precinct steps, a profound realization settling over him. They had mistaken her invisibility for vulnerability, never considering that America's most decorated special operator might be hiding in plain sight as an elderly black woman whom society had trained itself not to see. Behind him, Officer Gray approaches with her phone. "You need to see this. The Pentagon's releasing a statement in an hour. They're calling her the most decorated Navy SEAL in American history." By nightfall, Edna Sharp's name dominates every news cycle. Helicopter shots hover over her modest home, where reporters crowd the sidewalk. Inside, Edna sits in her darkened living room, curtains drawn, watching her past unfold on national television. The Pentagon's partial declassification of Operation Kingfisher has revealed one of the most extraordinary untold stories in American military history, the CNN anchor announces. From 1967 to 1971, a classified program integrated a small number of women into special operations roles, years before women were officially allowed in combat positions. The screen shows a photograph of a young Edna in unmarked fatigues, her expression unreadable as she stands beside male operators whose faces remain blurred. Most remarkable among these pioneers was Edna Sharp, whose recently declassified service record includes 27 confirmed high-risk operations and decorations that, until today, were attributed to unnamed operators for security reasons. And Richard Greenblatt, a pedo pilot but at heart a reason. Verna James sits beside her, watching her face rather than the television. "You okay with this?" "Does it matter?" she asks quietly. "Once something's declassified, there's no going back." Her phone hasn't stopped ringing. Military associations, veterans groups, morning shows, publishers offering book deals. She's ignored them all. "Robertson's flying in tomorrow," Werner informs her. "Pentagon wants to do a proper ceremony, recognize you publicly." Edna's laugh holds no humor. 50 years later, how generous. Across town, Officer Hector Hines sits in his apartment, surrounded by printouts of newly declassified documents. The more he learns about Edna Sharp, the more his understanding of history and his own assumptions unravels. A mission report details how Edna swam 2 miles upriver through enemy territory with a broken collarbone to extract an intelligence officer. Another describes her single-handedly holding off enemy forces while her team evacuated civilians. Commendations signed by presidents who never publicly acknowledged her existence. His phone buzzes, a text from Officer Gray. "Are you seeing this? They're saying she has more confirmed high-value target eliminations than Chris Kyle." Before he can respond, another text arrives from his grandfather, the department's first black officer. "This Sharp woman reminds me of stories I heard about black women serving unofficially in WII. History books leave out more than they include, son." Hines stares at the message, a generational wisdom that cuts to the heart of his discomfort. He'd prided himself on being color-blind in his policing, never considering that refusing to see color meant refusing to see the full context of people's lives, their struggles, their invisible histories. Meanwhile, Officer Souza paces his living room, agitation growing as news coverage paints him as the officer who harassed America's most decorated special operator. Online, he's becoming a meme, the cop who tried to take down a legend. "This is bullshit," he tells his wife. "How was I supposed to know? She looked like any other old lady." "That's exactly the point everyone's making, Jason," his wife replies quietly. "You saw an elderly black woman and assumed she was a criminal. You never considered any other possibility. I was responding to a call. I followed procedure. And if it had been an elderly white man in a nice neighborhood?" The question hangs between them, uncomfortable and unanswered. At the local newspaper office, Alicia Smith's exclusive first-hand account of Edna's arrest has gone viral. Her editor stands in the doorway, grinning. Washington Post called. They want to syndicate your story nationally. Alicia barely looks up from her research. I'm more interested in what's still classified. The Pentagon's only releasing certain missions, the heroic rescues, the extractions. But there are gaps in her service record. Years where she simply disappears. Maybe some things should stay buried, her editor suggests. That's not my call to make, Alicia responds. Edna Sharp spent 50 years being invisible when she should have been recognized as a pioneer. I won't participate in keeping any part of her story hidden. Her computer pings with an encrypted message. Another leak from her anonymous source. Cambodia operations remain classified. Ask about Phnom Penh, 1970. Back at Edna's home, the weight of exposure presses down like a physical force. For decades, her invisibility was both burden and shield. Now, with that shield stripped away, she feels more vulnerable than she did behind enemy lines. They're only telling half the story, she tells Werner. The palatable parts, the heroic rescues, the saved American lives. The other operations remain classified, Werner reminds her. For how long? Once they start unraveling this thread. She stares at her hands, steady hands that had once ended lives with clinical precision when missions required it. America loves its heroes simple and clean, Werner. They're not ready for the full truth of what we did. Werner's response is interrupted by a knock at the back door, a pattern they both recognize from field operations. Edna moves silently to the kitchen, retrieving a handgun from a hidden compartment with practiced ease. Expecting trouble? Werner asks, eyebrow raised. Always, she replies simply. But the visitor is Officer Hines, alone and unarmed. Edna studies him through the window before opening the door. Officer Hines, she acknowledges. Rather late for a social call. I'm not here officially, he explains. I wanted to apologize, not just for the arrest, but for not seeing you. Really seeing you. Edna's expression softens slightly. You saw what I wanted you to see, Officer Hines. What I've wanted everyone to see for 50 years. Just another invisible old black woman. Why, he asks, with your record, your accomplishments? Because recognition was never the point, she interrupts. The mission was the point, and when the official missions ended, I found new ones. Living quietly, serving my community, surviving. She gestures for him to enter, an invitation that feels significant to them both. Inside, Hines notices the chest beneath her bed is now open, photographs and medals spread across the quilt. One photo shows a much younger Edna in jungle terrain, arm around a Vietnamese child. That was after we evacuated a village before an unauthorized bombing run, she explains, following his gaze. That child is a grandmother now, living in California. We still exchange Christmas cards. As midnight approaches, 3 separate journeys of reckoning continue through the darkness. Hines listening to Edna's stories, reconsidering everything he thought he knew about service and visibility. Sousa staring at his ceiling, confronting biases he's long denied. And across town, Officer Gray researches the history of women in combat roles, discovering how many pioneers like Edna were erased from official narratives. By morning, the story will have evolved again, but for tonight, in a modest home surrounded by media vans, America's most decorated Navy SEAL finally begins to tell her own story, on her own terms, to an audience of one officer willing to truly listen. The police department's largest conference room has been transformed into an impromptu hearing chamber. News cameras line the back wall, their red lights blinking like electronic eyes. At the center table sits Police Chief Martinez, flanked by department attorneys and city officials. The public interest in this case has elevated it from routine internal review to high-pressure public reckoning. Edna enters wearing her formal Navy dress uniform for the first time in decades, a strategic decision suggested by Admiral Robertson. The decorations across her chest tell a story few civilians can fully comprehend. Navy Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Combat V, and multiple oak leaf clusters. Purple Heart with 2 stars. Medals that, until yesterday, were officially awarded to unnamed operators for security reasons. The room falls silent as she takes her seat, her posture perfect despite the old wounds that have never fully healed. Ms. Sharp, Chief Martinez begins, "We appreciate your willingness to participate in this hearing regarding the incident 3 days ago." "Commander Sharp," Admiral Robertson corrects from beside her. Her rank was never rescinded upon her transition to classified status. The chief nods, recalibrating. "Commander Sharp, this hearing will review the body camera footage and determine whether departmental procedures were followed appropriately during your arrest." Officer Souza shifts uncomfortably at the side table where he sits with Officers Hines and Gray. His attorney leans over, whispering urgently in his ear. "Before we begin," Edna says, her voice carrying the quiet authority that once commanded special operations teams, "I want to clarify that I'm not seeking punitive action against these officers." Murmurs ripple through the room. This isn't the vengeful narrative the media has been constructing. "My concern," she continues, "is with the systems and assumptions that led to this encounter, not just the individuals involved." The lights dim as body camera footage appears on the wall screen. From 3 different angles, Hines, Gray, and Souza, the confrontation unfolds. The approach with hands near weapons, the escalating commands, the moment when Souza grabs Edna's injured shoulder, triggering her defensive response. In the harsh clarity of video evidence, the officer's assumptions are laid bare. No questions about vehicle ownership, no request for identification before escalation, just immediate presumption of criminality based on an elderly black woman working on a car in her own neighborhood. When the RTM ordered her to begin repeat dose, she calmly told them, "The RT and her team aren't women." When the lights return, Chief Martinez looks troubled. "Officer Souza, would you care to explain your approach to this situation?" Souza straightens defensively. "We received a call about suspicious activity. I followed standard procedure for a potential vehicle theft in progress." "By immediately escalating to physical contact?" the chief questions. "The subject made a sudden movement toward her pocket," Souza insists. "I was reaching for my identification," Edna clarifies, her tone neutral. "Which I couldn't have known at the time," Souza counters. Admiral Robertson leans forward. "Officer Souza, in your training, were you taught to physically engage elderly subjects without verbal warning?" Souza flushes. "No, sir." "Then why did you do so with Commander Sharp?" The question hangs in the air, demanding an answer that goes beyond procedure to the heart of bias. Before Souza can respond, Officer Gray unexpectedly speaks up. "Permission to address the hearing, Chief?" Martinez nods, surprised. "I've reviewed our body camera footage multiple times," Gray begins, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "And I've been asking myself why we approached this situation the way we did. The dispatch call mentioned suspicious activity and an elderly black subject. Nothing in that call justified our tactical approach or immediate escalation." She takes a breath, glancing at Souza apologetically before continuing. "We responded based on assumptions, not observations, and I believe those assumptions were influenced by implicit bias regarding both race and age." The room erupts in murmurs. Officer Gray has just publicly acknowledged what many suspected, but few expected to hear stated so plainly by a police officer. Souza's attorney attempts damage control. "My client was responding to a potential crime in progress." "There was no crime," Officer Hines interrupts, joining Gray in breaking ranks, "and we had no evidence suggesting there was one, beyond a vague call and our own assumptions about who looks suspicious in that neighborhood. Chief Martinez struggles to maintain order as reporters frantically take notes. This internal fracturing of the thin blue line makes for explosive headlines. When the room quiets, Edna speaks. Her voice remains measured, but carries an intensity that commands attention. "I've spent my life in service to a country that often refused to see my full humanity," she begins. "As a black woman in special operations during Vietnam, I was invisible in plain sight, useful precisely because enemies and allies alike underestimated me. That invisibility served operational objectives then. But in civilian life, that same invisibility has different consequences." She turns to face the officers directly. "Officer Souza, you didn't see me as a homeowner, a veteran, or even as a full citizen deserving of basic respect. You saw a threat, because that's what your training and our society conditioned you to see when looking at someone who looks like me." Souza stares at the table, unable to meet her gaze. "The same invisibility that made me effective in combat made me vulnerable on American soil," Edna continues. "And that paradox isn't unique to me. It's the daily reality for millions of black Americans, especially our elders." The room has gone completely still, captivated by her quiet eloquence. "I don't want Officer Souza's badge," she concludes. "I want something far more difficult. I want genuine recognition of the biases that inform policing and concrete steps to address them, not just in this department, but across this country. I've served at great personal cost." Chief Martinez clears his throat, visibly moved. "Commander Sharp, on behalf of this department, I offer our sincere apology for the treatment you received. It falls far short of the respect you deserve, both as a decorated veteran and as a citizen." He turns to the officers. "Officer Souza, you'll be placed on administrative duty pending completion of implicit bias training. Officers Gray and Hines, I commend your honesty today. It's uncomfortable but necessary if we're to improve." As the hearing concludes, reporters surge forward, shouting questions, but the most powerful moment comes when Alicia Smith, who has been documenting everything from the press section, approaches Edna with a document in hand. "Commander Sharp," she says quietly, "I received this from a confidential source. It's about Operation Emerald Viper in Cambodia, 1970. The Pentagon is still refusing to declassify it, but I believe the public deserves the full truth about your service." Edna studies the young journalist, seeing the same determination she once saw in her own reflection. "Some operations remain classified for good reasons, Miss Smith. Have respect, Commander. Your history has been classified not for national security, but because America wasn't ready to acknowledge that its most effective special operator was a black woman," Alicia responds. "That's not security. That's systemic erasure." Their eyes lock in silent understanding. Two black women, separated by generations, but united in their fight for visibility. "Come by my house tomorrow," Edna finally says. "There are some stories that should be told, even if the Pentagon disagrees." As they exit the building, Admiral Robertson walks beside Edna, noting the exchange. "You sure about this, Mako? Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again." Edna watches Officer Hines helping an elderly woman navigate through the media crowd, a small gesture that suggests the beginning of change. "I've lived in shadows long enough, Bill," she replies. "Maybe it's time for the full light of day, whatever it reveals." 3 weeks after the hearing, the Pentagon Ceremonial Hall gleams with polished brass and solemn tradition. High-ranking military officials fill the front rows, their chests heavy with decorations. Behind them sit journalists, politicians, and civilians invited to witness a moment 50 years overdue. At precisely 1400 hours, Admiral William Robertson takes the podium. Though retired for 15 years, he wears his dress uniform with the same precision that defined his career. "Today, we correct a historical oversight," he begins. "We acknowledge service that was hidden, not just by the necessities of classified operations, but by the limitations of our own vision as a nation and as a military. The side doors open. Edna Sharp enters in full dress uniform, her stride measured and dignified. The medals already on her chest represent only a fraction of what she earned. Today, that record will be completed. In the audience, Officer Hector Hines watches with a complex mix of emotions. Beside him sits Officer Gray, who requested to attend. Officer Souza declined his invitation. Still struggling with his role in the incident that brought them here, Commander Edna Josephine Sharp served this nation during a time when neither her gender nor her race were considered compatible with special operations, Robinson continues. She was recruited precisely because she could move through the world unseen, a tactical advantage born from society's failure to recognize her full humanity. Alicia Smith, seated in the press section, records every word. Her series of articles on Edna's service, including the still controversial Cambodia operations, has transformed her from local reporter to nationally recognized journalist. More importantly, it has transformed the national conversation about race, gender, and recognition. Between 1967 and 1971, Commander Sharp completed 34 confirmed high-risk operations, Robertson states. 27 of these have now been declassified. They include the extraction of 17 American prisoners of war, the rescue of 43 civilians from combat zones, and actions that directly saved the lives of over 100 American and Allied personnel. He pauses, making eye contact with Pentagon officials in the front row. The remaining 7 operations remain classified, though I personally believe that decision should be reconsidered. What I can say is that those missions were among the most crucial of the conflict, and Commander Sharp's role was central to their success. Edna stands at attention, her expression revealing nothing as Robertson lists operations by name and date. Kingfisher, Broken Arrow, Distant Thunder, each representing weeks of danger, moments of terror, and decisions that have haunted her sleep for decades. For these actions, previously attributed to unnamed operators, Commander Sharp is today formally recognized with the following decorations. What follows is unprecedented. A recitation of honors that, taken together, make Edna Sharp the most decorated special operator in American history. As each medal is announced, a piece of hidden history is restored. In the audience, Verna James watches with tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. Of their original team, only he and Edna remain to see this day. After the ceremony, a reception follows where Edna finds herself surrounded by young female service members, many from minority backgrounds, their eyes filled with wonder and questions. "Ma'am," one young Navy lieutenant asks, "how did you handle being the only woman in special operations?" Edna considers the question. "I wasn't the only one," she finally answers. "There were 7 of us in the program. I'm just the only one who lived long enough to be recognized." The revelation silences the group. Edna has never spoken publicly about the other women. Their names remain classified, their sacrifices unacknowledged. Their stories deserve to be told too, Edna continues. "Perhaps that's my final mission." Across the room, Officer Hines approaches cautiously, aware of his status as an outsider in this military gathering. "Commander Sharp," he greets her formally. "Congratulations." "Officer Hines," she acknowledges with a nod. "Thank you for coming. I wanted you to know we're implementing new training protocols at the precinct, specifically addressing assumptions about elderly citizens and racial bias in routine calls." "A good start," Edna replies. "But systems don't change overnight." "No, ma'am, they don't," he agrees. "That's why I've also started a community liaison program. We're holding monthly forums where officers listen, just listen, to residents' experiences with policing." Edna studies him, seeing genuine commitment behind his words. "And Officer Souza?" Hines hesitates. He's struggling. The public attention has been difficult. But he's attending the forums, not speaking yet, just listening. Sometimes listening is the hardest part. Edna observes. As the reception continues, Admiral Robertson joins them, champagne flute in hand. "Edna, there's someone I'd like you to meet." He gestures toward a young black woman in a wheelchair, wearing army dress uniform with captain's bars. Captain Michaels led the extraction operation in Kandahar last year. Saved her entire unit after their helicopter was shot down. The young captain looks at Edna with undisguised awe. "Commander Sharp, your declassified operations have been required study at Special Forces training for the past month. What you accomplished with the technology available then, different times, different challenges," Edna responds modestly. "But the same courage, I see." She nods toward the captain's Purple Heart. As they talk, Alicia approaches with Werner James. "Commander, we've been discussing something we'd like your input on." "That sounds ominous," Edna remarks dryly. "The families of your former team members, the other women in the program, have been contacting me." Alicia explains. "They've lived for decades not knowing the full truth about how their loved ones served and died." Werner continues. "With your help, we could create a proper memorial, not just for our team, but for all the women who served in classified roles when the military officially excluded them from combat." Edna's expression softens. "Diane, Rebecca, Josephine, Maria, Sandra, and Catherine," she says, speaking their names aloud perhaps for the first time in decades. "They deserve to be remembered." 2 days later, Edna returns to her neighborhood, where an unexpected transformation has occurred. The media vans have finally departed, but something else has taken their place. Community. Neighbors who barely acknowledged her before now stop to talk. Children who once gave her house a wide berth now leave handmade cards in her mailbox. Even Mrs. Abernathy from the Neighborhood Association has sent a formal apology for past slights. Most significantly, her front yard has been transformed. While she was in Washington, neighbors organized by Alicia planted a garden with 7 rose bushes, 1 for each woman in the classified program. As Edna inspects this memorial, Officer Gray pulls up in her patrol car. She's not in uniform, signaling this is a personal visit. "Commander Sharp," she greets, approaching with a small package. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Edna assures her. "And please, it's just Edna now." Gray hands her the package. "My father found this in his military archives. He thought you should have it." Inside is a faded photograph. 7 women in unmarked fatigues standing before a helicopter, their faces young and determined. No insignia, no identification, nothing to mark the historical significance of what they represented. "Where did he get this?" Edna asks, her voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Was a military historian in the Pentagon archives. This was misfiled for decades under miscellaneous training exercises. He recognized you from the news." Edna traces the faces of women long gone. Diane with her quick wit. Rebecca, who could outshoot any man on the team. Catherine, whose linguistic skills had saved them countless times. "Thank you," she says simply. "This is priceless." As Officer Gray leaves, Edna takes the photograph inside, placing it on her mantel beside her medals. For the first time, her home begins to reflect her true history, not just as a decorated operator, but as part of a sisterhood that changed military history from the shadows. That evening, she receives an email from the Pentagon, a formal request for her to consult on the declassification review of the remaining operations. The subject line reads, "Operation Emerald Viper, Reconsideration." Simultaneously, a text arrives from Alicia. "Community Center approved our proposal for the memorial exhibit. When can we start the interviews?" And finally, a handwritten note delivered by courier from Admiral Robertson. "The truth, however difficult, deserves the light of day. The next generation deserves to know what was possible, even when it was forbidden." Edna sits in her garden as twilight falls, contemplating these messages and the 7 rose bushes, each beginning to bloom in different colors. After 50 years of shadows, a new mission takes shape. ensuring that invisibility, once used as both weapon and constraint, never again obscures the contributions of those society finds easiest to overlook. For the first time in decades, Commander Edna Sharp embraces visibility not as vulnerability, but as her most powerful final act of service. 6 months later, the National Museum of African American History and Culture unveils a new permanent exhibition, Invisible Warriors, the classified history of women in special operations. At its center stands a life-sized photograph of 7 young women in unmarked fatigues, the only known image of the complete Kingfisher team. Edna Sharp, now a reluctant public figure, cuts the ribbon. The crowd includes military officials, historians, journalists, and families of the 6 women who never lived to see their contributions acknowledged. "My sisters in arms operated in shadows by necessity and design," Edna begins, her voice strong despite her 76 years. "They died carrying secrets their country wasn't ready to hear, that some of its most effective warriors were black and brown women whom society had trained itself not to see." She gestures to the exhibition behind her. Declassified mission reports, personal effects, and oral histories she's spent months helping compile. This exhibit isn't just about setting historical records straight, though that matters. It's about challenging the assumptions we make about capability, about who can be heroic, about whose contributions we value. In the front row, Catherine Wilson's daughter clutches a newly issued silver star, her mother's medal, finally bearing her actual name rather than John Doe. Beside her sit other families, each holding similar decorations that represent both closure and an opening of historical wounds. America's relationship with recognition has always been complicated by race, by gender, by the narratives we find comfortable versus those that challenge our perceptions. Edna continues, "My team succeeded partly because we were invisible. Enemies and allies alike underestimated us. But that tactical advantage came with a terrible cost, historical erasure." The museum falls silent, hundreds hanging on her words. That erasure didn't end with our military service. It followed us home, shaped how police saw us, how medical professionals treated us, how society valued our contributions and our very lives. In the audience, Officers Hines and Gray listen intently. Their department has become a national model for community responsiveness policing in the months since Edna's case made headlines. Even Officer Souza sits among them, his journey toward recognition of his biases ongoing but genuine. The question before us isn't just about acknowledging past injustices, Edna challenges. It's about recognizing how those same patterns of invisibility and hypervisibility continue today. Who do we see as threats? Who do we see as heroes? Whose pain matters? Whose contributions count? She turns to the wall behind her where interactive screens allow visitors to learn about modern-day service members from diverse backgrounds, continuing the legacy of the Kingfisher team. This exhibition honors 7 women who served knowing they might never be recognized. But it also demands that we do better, that we create a world where such choices aren't necessary, where excellence is recognized regardless of what package it comes in. As the ceremony concludes, visitors begin exploring the exhibition. Alicia Smith, whose book on the Kingfisher program has topped bestseller lists for weeks, guides families through displays featuring their loved ones. Werner James stands beside a particularly powerful installation, a recreation of the prison camp in North Vietnam, where Edna led the extraction operation that earned her the Navy Cross. Visitors can hear actual radio transmissions, declassified after 50 years. "Mako team in position," Edna's young voice reports calmly, despite distant gunfire. "Moving to extract packages, resistance heavier than expected." "Abort mission," comes the response. "Repeat, abort mission. Resistance too heavy." A pause, then Edna's voice again. "Negative on abort. Packages confirmed alive. We're going in." What follows is 20 minutes of coordinated assault, executed with precision, that military historians now study as textbook special operations excellence. Near this exhibit, Admiral Robertson speaks with Pentagon officials about the remaining classified operations, particularly the controversial Cambodia mission that still raises difficult questions about American military actions during that era. Full disclosure is the only path forward, he insists. Half-truths serve no one. Outside the museum, a different kind of recognition unfolds. The Community Oversight Committee Edna established has expanded to 20 cities nationwide. Its model of civilian police cooperation has reduced use-of-force incidents by 47% in participating jurisdictions. Officer Hines now leads training sessions on recognition bias, teaching officers to question their initial perceptions, particularly regarding elderly citizens and people of color. Officer Gray has been promoted to community liaison, working directly with neighborhood leaders to rebuild trust. Even Officer Souza has found a path toward growth, though his journey remains the most difficult. After months of defensive anger, a conversation with Werner James, veteran to veteran, helped him recognize that acknowledging bias isn't an indictment of character, but an opportunity for evolution. As evening falls, Edna returns home to find her front yard filled with neighbors gathered for a surprise celebration. Mr. Chen has brought food from his restaurant. Children from the block have created a hand-painted banner. Our hero next door, Alicia, approaches with a special gift, a bound collection of letters from young women inspired by Edna's story to pursue military careers, particularly in special operations roles that were officially closed to women until recently. Your visibility has created possibility for them, Alicia explains. They can envision futures they couldn't before. Edna accepts the book with characteristic grace, though the weight of public attention still sits uncomfortably on her shoulders. For decades, her survival depended on being overlooked. Now, being seen, truly seen, requires a different kind of courage. As neighbors share stories and break bread together, Edna slips away briefly to her backyard garden. The 7 rose bushes have flourished, each now in full bloom. She touches each one, whispering names that history almost forgot. Diane, Rebecca, Josephine, Maria, Sandra, Catherine. Then she adds, mission accomplished. When she returns to the gathering, someone has set up an impromptu dance floor. Werner James approaches, offering his hand with a formal bow that makes her laugh. "I'll dance, Commander," he asks, eyes twinkling. For old time's sake, as they move with the surprising grace of former operators whose bodies remember more than their years suggest, neighbors watch in wonder, seeing perhaps for the first time the full humanity of the woman who lived among them for decades. This, perhaps, is the most profound form of recognition, not medals or museums, but the simple acknowledgement of complete personhood, of complexity, of value beyond utility or service. The camera pulls back, showing Edna's neighborhood transformed by understanding, her history no longer hidden, her present no longer defined by invisibility. What invisible heroes might be living in your community right now? Have you ever discovered that someone you knew had an extraordinary past you never suspected? How might our assumptions about age, race, or gender cause us to overlook the remarkable people around us? If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Timeless Memoir for more powerful stories that challenge our perceptions and expand our understanding of American history. Remember, recognition isn't just about honoring the past. It's about creating a future where everyone's contributions are valued, where no one needs to be extraordinary to be seen as fully human.